So as promised, every week, Nicole Auerbach, we got her right back with us. She's going to talk to us about college football. I feel like the season's almost, what are we, over a third of the way home now? Or we're just approaching a third of the way home now. So it's freaking flying by. Scott Van Pelt said it the other day. He said, cherish it, because it really does move fast. How are you? How was Saturday?
I'm good. I am also getting sad about that. It's like, oh, great, finally conference play. And then you realize that you are already a third of the way through. I feel like there was a little bit of a hangover for some of these teams. I mean, like coming off of big ones last week, and there were some ugly games, stayed up late trying to find USC, Oregon State. Yeah. That was how the night ended, because I do not have Pac-12 network. So it was an interesting one. I think we learned some stuff about some of these teams and are still waiting on others, but we are thriving. I've become an energy drink person to get through these Saturdays. I know you do marathons on Sundays, so you know.
What's the energy drink of choice?
Okay, so Chris Budden, who's sideline reporter at ESPN, got me on Celsius, which is this, I think it's like a natural drink. It's kind of like a tea. Yeah. It's pretty good.
Okay.
And then I'll alternate between that. And then there's Alani Nu. They have these energy drinks that have a bunch of different flavors. So yeah, unfortunately, definitely way worse for my health, but I have become one of these energy drink people.
As a guy who can't drink coffee, admittedly, and I hate to say this, I've started on those little Zen things you've seen a bunch of dudes tweeting about, the little nicotine vessels. That's my coffee. That's my energy drink. So I'll have to try those, though. That sounds healthier. Okay, Nicole, who's affected the most when it comes to your confidence in them based on yesterday's close win?
Oh, that is a good question. Okay, I was not that concerned about Georgia. Right. I feel like they have shown us enough that they're allowed to have a clunker. Mm-hmm. Let's say Michigan, I don't really feel like it was that close, but I see where people were, JJ McCarthy had his moments where he looked young, he looked inexperienced, he looked new. But, I think that game went ultimately about how I said. I think next week when they play Iowa, that's where we could have some cause for concern. I'm definitely concerned about Oklahoma because they lost. Right. I think they were like a team that I had in my top 10 overall. I'm definitely concerned about USC. That's probably the team I'm most concerned about coming out of this, because this feels like such a Lincoln Riley Oklahoma team where they had this high-powered offense and then they ran into someone in a weird place. It's kind of their Iowa State. Like every conference, stealing a line from my editor, Eric, every conference has an Iowa State, and Oregon State is that team in the Pac-12. But the offense really struggled. Obviously, it came through right at the very end to save the game. But it was the defense that kept them in the game. They forced the turnovers. I believe more in the defense. But where is that toughness? Where is that? Some of those Oklahoma teams were soft. And it feels like having a performance like that, nearly losing, it just wasn't what I was hoping to see out of USC. Maybe they turn it around. Maybe this is what they needed. But I just was very concerned about just how kind of quickly that offense turned off and that it took so long for them to really fight and get the win at the end.
Listen, Wake Forest poses a very unique challenge, but I watched that Clemson game closely, and I kind of wonder what you make of that. I mean, it felt like those corners, they just couldn't get them help because of the way they hold that mesh. And that was one of the most striking things about the Clausen and that group. They just pose such a unique challenge. Do you worry about Clemson playing them close, or you just chalk it up to that's a really tough top 25 team and Sam Hartman's real good? He was gutsy yesterday. What do you think about Clemson coming off that game?
Well, my first question is for you as someone who played, when you watch that offense in particular, is it cool and interesting? Is it frustrating? What is that slow mesh like to watch?
It's frustrating when you have Clemson, you bet on Clemson and you're like, get this corner some help. But then you realize that they physically can't, because if you're going to help him, they're going to run the ball down your throat. And it's a numbers game. And, I think the one thing that Clemson could have done maybe at times a little bit better was win their one-on-ones. And eventually they did at the end of the game. But that would have been what you had to do. And that was what you could bank on for Clemson in the past to be able to pull away from that team. Was that's the X factor. If you can beat guys one-on-one up front, then you're okay. But they're a fun team. I don't know what their ceiling is, but if the QB plays like he played yesterday, and we know the guy, it feels like he's been around a while, They're fun and they can play with almost anybody.
It was a weird game because it flipped all of the ways that we've seen them win games with DJ for the most part, except for that Notre Dame game. I mean, if you had given me his stat line, shown me some of those deep balls, I would have thought they would have blown out Wake Forest. But like the defense was so suspect, and they've had some injuries, but it was such a weird way to see Clemson win a game that was pretty jarring, especially because of the way they've really owned Wake Forest over Dabo's whole tenure. And even like last year's team, when we thought Wake was really good. So it killed me for Sam Hartman. I mean, he played so well. And the good part was I did see a lot of the draft guys talking about just how many scouts and people, front office folks will be watching that tape of Sam Hartman. But yeah, I feel like we did learn something about Clemson's offense, that it can exist, that it can be explosive, that DJ can throw those balls, which we hadn't seen. But yeah, now I'm concerned about the defense. I don't really know what to make of them. They've got NC State next week. These two games, if they win them both, they're in the driver's seat for the Atlantic again. So like after all this and all this hand-wringing over them, we may just be back in the same place where they win the ACC. So who knows? But I think between this week and next week, we'll have a much better idea.
Somebody texted me. They were like, you didn't know you were betting against Andrew Luck, did you? Because like Hartman, I feel like is going to surprise some people as we approach, April, and people talking about, a draft-heavy quarterback heavy draft class rather, and he's one that people kind of just forget about. I think a lot of people chalk it up to the system, but he makes a lot of throws. So, and a great beard. The guy's got a great beard. We love Hartman, dude, on this podcast. I hated rooting against him. How about, what's the best quarterback redemption story so far this year? Because I feel like a few of them, we were talking offline and you mentioned there's a bunch of guys that have been written off by their fan bases, and now they're back in the mix and they're having success.
Yeah, it's a great example of the good of the transfer portal when everyone was all fear-mongering before it came in. I mean, you see guys, Michael Penix Jr. was hurt a lot at Indiana, frustrated that fan base with a lot of picks and inopportune times. He's having a great season. Washington is undefeated. He's playing better than he ever did, actually, even when he was healthy at Indiana. Adrian Martinez, though, might be the best story because he was blamed for so much at Nebraska, and some of it was on him. He did have a lot of turnovers that cost him games sometimes, but what a life upgrade to get to leave Nebraska, which obviously already fired Scott Frost, already still dysfunctional, go to Kansas State. They lost a week ago, but you just saw Oklahoma totally destroy Nebraska, your old school, that fan base that was frustrated with you. You have the game of your life. I love the bow as a celebration. Like that was just an incredible one at the end when he knew the game was wrapped up, but just an incredible individual performance. Hendon Hooker going from Virginia Tech to Tennessee, also a great one, a great story. He's also playing, like these guys are playing better than they ever did at their old place. And it's such a great story.
Love Hooker having success in Tennessee and not in Blacksburg. I mean, just love that. And so, I'm happy for all these guys. And I'm happy for college football because it feels like you were watching Tennessee, Florida yesterday. And although Tennessee kind of had the game at arm's length, like Florida wouldn't go away, it's a fun game again. Like it's been a fun game, but these are two pretty good teams. They're talented teams. And Tennessee's ceiling, we're yet to find out what that is. So how about Kansas not being ranked?
Okay, this is what I'm very, very upset about. For weeks, we're like, making it a meme, right? But it's like ranked coward, right? Ranked Kansas cowards, like do it. And it just feels like this is such a brand name issue. The fact that they're not ranked yet based on what we've actually seen them do. Duke is a good team this year. That was a good win, but they also resoundingly beat Houston, the win at West Virginia. Like these are wins. If any other team had them, but had a bigger name, they would already have been ranked. I mean, Miami was still ranked last weekend. And it's part of the reason like the middle upset was like a ranked upset, but it's so frustrating because again, anyone else, they would already be ranked, and they are one of the more exciting and fun offenses. Like Jalen Daniels is great. We're having a lot of fun watching him, but what a great story. And it just feels like it takes these teams so much longer to get their respect. And I was frustrated. The coaches didn't rank them. And then the AP voters didn't rank them. And like, are people not watching? There's not that many teams that have been fairly consistent over the first month of the season, and Kansas actually is one. And what is it? What's the harm? Like, what if they were in the 20s? It means a lot. This stuff just bothers me so much because like they've actually earned it if you watch them play, and people just aren't picking them. But if they were Miami, if they were Florida State, I mean, we would be talking about them so differently because they would have already been ranked. It's
the truth. And, we've got some JMU folks in the house that work for Greenlight. There was like hey, why the hell aren't we ranked? Is that a fair question?
I mean, all of this is, and JMU, I mean, like they're not bowl eligible because it's their first year in FBS. There's so many dumb pieces to some of this stuff, but it's like peel behind the curtain, like AP voters. It's a lot of people who cover different teams. So they're probably at a game and then they're just looking at box scores, and then certain team names don't jump out to them, or they just kind of move people up and down. But it sucks.
It seems ridiculous
because it's not accurately. That's how it works, though.
They should let guys and gals sitting there Saturday on their couch rank these teams. I feel like people on Twitter watch more college football than the people you're describing. Couch poll.
And they'll tell you that too, because it's so hard to watch everything or catch up on everything when you're at a game.
Yeah.
But that's just how it's always worked. And so, but again, you would think that like the Kansas story would have like crossed over, would have been something that we all would have seen. But it's frustrating. And again, like it's sort of like Clemson started the season probably way higher than they should have. And again, they haven't lost. They look good at times. But it's brand name stuff. I mean, that's why they were top 5 or top 10 or wherever they began. So it's frustrating. And I really hope that Kansas just keeps winning and then everyone will have to rank them.
I'm frustrated for Lawrence. I'm frustrated for Harrisonburg and maybe next week for those two programs. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us.
Yep. Anytime. Looking forward to chatting next week.
Yep. See you next week. Listen to the full podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast streaming platforms. Wherever you want to get the podcast, you can get the podcast. Pretty simple. New episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Podcasts get pretty wild. This is real tame.